from your assessment, to what extent is the issue of illegal immigration straining South Africa's public resources?
So this has a huge impact in terms of the resources that are also available here in South Africa. If you can look even with the issues of the critical skills, I'm glad that the panelists next to me mentioned the mistakes that have been committed in the past. But what we are having here, we find that South Africans are unable at most times to enjoy the resources that are available to them as South Africans due to issues of illegal immigration. If you can check, even with regard to the hospitality industry, we are speaking of youth unemployment. That's a huge crisis in South Africa. But if you can check in all these establishments, majority of them, they've employed, in most cases, illegal immigrants. When you check with the issues of the public facilities, in particular health, it's so sad to understand that, especially for some of us who live in locations, Alexandra, Tembisa, right, where you see people, just crossing a border and be here in South Africa so that at least they can give birth. People who are coming, yes, it is essential, that they come, but, we are saying the legality part must be emphasized, because we can't have the movement of people without understanding how many. As a result, it also affects the states in terms of what it's having in the public domain.
We just have to study the numbers, because when we were even having a conversation before this, I think the made a good point about the difference between the applications that the minister was talking about and the real backlog that is in Home Affairs. But of course, anything, whether it's decreasing the numbers by 10 or 20, it's progress that we want. But we must not be too excited to celebrate superficial progress. There's a systemic problem at Home Affairs. And I think when the minister, working together with various departments, starts to look at that, that's when we'll then start to see, that there's real progress.
Well, that appears to be the case, not just in this particular announcement, but across the board.
Yeah.
So, for example, there have been lots of progress made in respect of clearing backlogged visa applications.
Right.
The minister is making certain efforts there. But I think it comes down to the core. It's quite amazing. It's the same department with the same DG, with a new head, and that seems to be making some difference. Now, whether that is going to be sustainable or whether that's just cosmetic, only time will tell.
Right.
But on the ground, can you imagine if you're a child having to write matric and you don't have an identity document?
Yeah.
That's serious.
Having said that, how do we marry or how do we balance the need to support those who are forced to leave their countries of origin for various reasons with the local population? How do you do that?
Yeah, no, definitely, Glenn. There must be a highly coordinated in terms of the working relationship from the South African government and those African countries that are experiencing these challenges. Because not if we are saying no, there's issues of war and hunger, that does not necessarily mean that it should compromise the South African laws. Despite the issues that these Pan-African countries, or maybe African continent at large, experiencing problems. When immediately someone took the decision to say, no, I must vacate to South Africa for various reasons, the right processes must be followed. Right. And there is a mischaracterization of South Africans when we are saying, no, put South African first. We understand that we live in a global world. There's no way where people can't move, but that movement must be done within the prescript of the country where you are going. But recently, what we are seeing in South Africa, we are seeing illegal immigrants who are coming to South Africa, and when they are here, they have no intention of respecting South Africans' law. As a result, the South Africans themselves, like we're here in the audience, they took matters into their own hands to protect the sovereignty of the country.
Look, I think the other big problem is that there's no border control management in South Africa. In fact, the case that we've been making is that the border doesn't even exist. So I agree with someone from the audience who said that the other big problem of corruption is what is leading to the polarization of South Africans with other African countries.
Well, we have
Because
the Border
government-
Management Authority. Are they not
the,
making any
the
difference?
border is simply not
Yes, sir.
there. I mean, we could have it on paper, but I think you and I can agree that people are able to access South Africa in various parts, whether in Limpopo, anywhere, and there's no one. There's completely no one there. So you ought to fix that. And it's not speaking English. It's saying that we're not going to resolve these problems if we do not have systems in place to ensure that anyone who enters South Africa, whether they are coming from Africa, whether they are coming from Europe, whether they come from anywhere, there ought to be border control management, and that person must be documented and accounted for.
Right.
It's the case that we're making. In the absence of that, we're going to speak around in circles, fighting amongst each other, pointing heads and this one and that one. We have to fix the border control management in South Africa.
Right.
We have to get rid of corruption in South Africa. It's the only way we're going to ensure that we follow all these laws that are in existence.
Before I go to a break, Mr. Isup, do we know how many undocumented foreign nationals there are in South Africa currently?
Not accurately. I think the last guess by Census SA was in the region of about 5 million.
5 million.
So one thing that I also want to clarify and emphasize from the Action SA point of view, if you could see that, we haven't abandoned our stance on Monday, we also show solidarity with the like-minded organization where we're saying, no, enough is enough, South African first. So we were there in Pretoria. And with regard to the local economy, particularly looking at Spaza Shop, we are still continue and will want to partner with like-minded organizations who are emphasizing that the local economy must go back to the rightful owners. So we are readily available as Action SA, and also to emphasize that it is encouraging that we are having understanding on the ground that these things must be done through the law, as the colleague have said that they are doing their operation within the ambits of the law. So we are here, we are together, we are with you, and in Parliament. If you can check our Chief Whip, Lerato Ngobeni, who is also our spokesperson, he has also been very hard at the issues of immigration, where we're demanding answers from the minister, not this publicity that it's happening.
The small business intervention and the enforcement of a list of undesirable sectors where foreign nationals can't get business visas, is that in full effect?
No, not to my knowledge yet. Look, as I said, the Immigration Act doesn't allow for that kind of business because the DTI doesn't support it. So now you have the other sector of foreign migrants who are here on asylum-seeking permits, and they have no restrictions. And these are the shops that are operated by them because the Constitutional Court has made it clear they may work and study and operate a business, and indeed now even migrate out of refugee permits into immigration permits if they meet the requirements.
Right.
So there's developments there as well. I think that on the ground, you're beginning to hear local governments saying no foreigner will be given a license to operate a spaza shop, only South African citizens, etc. But, a lot of foreigners have now become permanent residents and citizens over time, through the migration system. Obviously, the frustration on the ground is palpable, and people are looking for answers, and they're saying, let's enforce the Immigrations Act. But if the Immigrations Act doesn't apply, you can't enforce it on that particular person. So even the preamble to the Immigrations Act, that says the objectives, it says they recognize the contribution of foreigners, and, xenophobia should be avoided. I'm not saying there's xenophobia, I'm saying this is what the provisions of the Act say. So we have to work towards solutions, and perhaps one of the solutions would be to invite partnerships with the foreign store owners who seem to have the ability to put stock together and to run businesses on an ongoing basis. And perhaps partnering rather than just shutting the door might be a long-term solution.
Look, we don't want to engage in a populist discussion like other organizations would do, because I think there are many political organizations in South Africa who have used the question of open borders and foreigners to get votes like it was raised here, and then they don't follow up on the promises that they make. So we're not engaged in that part, but listen to what we are doing. So we went into Parliament and we said to the Minister, Minister, you've got a critical skills list where you are saying these skills are not here in South Africa. And we were surprised. On the list you've got a pharmacist intern. On the list you've got a nurse. And we said, how can a nurse be a scarce skill in South Africa when there are so many young graduates, unemployed youth who can be nurses, who can be pharmacists? And even if you say to me the problem is about experience, there's no way an intern. So it means even an intern from abroad has more experience than a South African graduate. So we're fighting that in Parliament. So we are dealing with the legislation. We don't want to engage in a public spat that seeks to polarize South African communities.
Right.
But we are fighting the legislation. We're saying the minister must prioritize South African graduates and South African youth when it comes to jobs and skills.
With regards to the perceptions around foreign nationals versus the reality on the ground, how does that marry up for you?
Look, I think the last speaker makes a very good point, because we are being made to fight against each other by people who are profit-driven. He's absolutely right that even the illegal, or rather the foreigners themselves, are being exploited by the same businesses, because they know that if someone is desperate, maybe there's war in their country or they had to run away, they are willing to take 500 Rand or even 1,000 Rand a month, whereas a typical worker in South Africa won't take that much. They know that they can't follow labor practices, because these people can't report them to the police station, because if they go to the police station, the first thing they're going to be asked is about documentation. So they exploit them, sometimes they don't pay them. So the real problem here, again, it's the business owners. But secondly, there ought to be consequences, and that's where government then comes in. Government also doesn't, there are no consequences for these business and factory owners. Like the legislation is there. I mean, we spoke about the 60%. So it's not a problem for legislation.
Well, the pushback would be that they are trying to make some inroads. You saw the recent blitz in terms of the various restaurants around South Africa. Does that not give you hope that there's something being done?
Look, I think those are PR stunts. I mean, it's like what the Minister of Correctional Services did when called SABC, called Newsroom and everyone, and did one visit in some prison. Those are PR stunts. There ought to be real consequences, like business owners either must be fined, they must be arrested, and that is the only way we're going to be able to resolve the polarization. But I'm not persuaded that I must hate on someone who's being exploited themselves by the same businesses. So the problem is with government corruption, the problem is with factory owners, business owners. They ought to follow the legislation.
Right. Advice?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think there's a high level of disrespect sometimes, to the people that have positions and power, because ordinarily they no longer live in the spaces where ordinary people are. So that's where there's a mismatch, But if you can check in terms of the spaza that are on different locations, you'll realize that's why in some rare cases you find that, the products that are being sold to the community, they have an impact, because health standards wise, we've seen children dying. And when people, call out these things, they are being named xenophobic, they are being called populist, so that's a disrespect that is existing. So, but if people can, allow themselves to be humble enough to understand the struggles of the people, not just to go there and listen and think that, maybe I'm an expert on this, and then academic, come there with academic concept, but go there with the open heart to understand the reality of the people on the ground. And then that's where we'll get the solution, because these things of, creating academic solutions without even going to the ground, it's one of the cases that now we find ourselves having a mismatch in terms of what the higher learning institutions are providing into what the market needs.
Right.
So I think there's this level of approach that is being driven. Hence, South African are labeled xenophobic, without having to understand the context in terms of where they are coming from.
Does the legislation need to be reformed?
Well, I think it's both-ended. I think legislation definitely needs to be reformed. And I think implementation of just ordinary laws and bylaws must be enforced. I mean, if you are able to open a scrapyard in a residential area, that's already in violation of the bylaw. So now if you don't police that, and effective policing means making sure that all bylaws are applied, then you're going to have a bigger problem, as we've seen. We've seen even public parks being taken over. So I think the problems are multifaceted. We're looking for solutions. One of the ways that a person can engage with government is write to the minister. The minister was invited for lunch by some big business. Arrange a lunch, arrange for the ministers to come out as they did during the elections, engage with the minister. And make it a public record. Write that and publish it, and engage with your local councillors as well. It's important. I think we all have a responsibility to fix things.
What's the solution? Is it a political? Is it ground level? Is it a bit of both?
Look, there must be a political will from government to resolve these issues. And in the absence of a political will, then we're not going to be able to resolve all of these issues that are being raised here. We are more in line with the young people, in particular the graduates, and even the youth that simply have matric or the NEET youth, not in employment, not in education and training, to say that any job opportunity that is in South Africa must first prioritize and look at South African youth and graduates. So that's why the first fight that we're going to be waging is against, or rather is in review of the so-called criticals list. Because these are things that are there, low-hanging fruits. I see the other much broader discussion that we're having. But we've got a list of so-called critical skills or scarce skills where literally the minister is approving visas. It is saying we don't have nurses in South Africa, therefore we're going to get a nurse from outside. We don't have mechanical engineers, therefore we're going to get them from outside. This is a fight that we can literally fight and win and get the type of gains and the type of outcomes that the people are fighting for.
Right.
To say, let's review this list, let's prioritize South African youth, let's prioritize South African graduates. That's a fight that we're waging. But at the center of it, there must be a political will to remove the corruption at the border, to remove corruption of Home Affairs, even the South African police services, the corruption there as well.
Accountability advice, something that came out strongly. Is there enough accountability in South Africa in order to put paid to certain issues that we're facing currently?
Clearly not. There's no accountability. Even the enforcement of the law. When it is being done, it's for the publicity and for the cameras, and then when they're done, it's closed case. And in the past week, while they were busy with their publicity stunt, it was so disappointing to hear a chief inspector, after they found one of the restaurants in Sandton having many illegal workers who were there, meaning that South Africans were robbed for those opportunities, particularly the young people, to say that now they must start the process of formalizing those guys instead of communicating of these individuals need to be deported and the owner be held accountable. So it's one of those things that clearly tells us there's no political will. There's no accountability even from the chief inspectors themselves. I think, we need to start to inspect them in terms of, where they've been, because there's these issues of corruption, because you can't stand in front of cameras and then the whole South Africa is watching you, you find something that's wrong, and then you create your own law in your head to say, now we must start formalizing while young people are seated at home. And these kind of things, it breaks families. Yeah. It renders our education useless because we are having graduates who can't get employment. At the end of the day, the criminals are flourishing rather than those that went to school. And then how do we encourage the fellow young people to say they must go to school when the situation is like this?
Look, it's a huge land border, right? South Africa has a land border of over 5,000 kilometers. We've got over 70 ports of entry. And that we talk about land, sea, and air. I wonder what is the possible solution there. Do you think, Sihle, that regional bodies, continental bodies, SADC, AU, should get involved in finding possible solutions here?
Yeah, I think the other problem is that there's no leadership in Africa in general. Because as some of the audience would have put it, is that a lot of these problems are caused by the various conflicts in Africa, corruption of corrupt governments of Africa, and the inability of African leaders to hold each other accountable. So we need leadership in Africa, and that's the one way we are able to resolve this. But secondly, the anger must be directed at government officials. Like, those are the people who are responsible for the ineffectiveness of various systems that are in place in South Africa. The anger must be directed at Home Affairs, the minister must be directed at the border management, not a baby who's 2 years old who finds themselves here. The problem here is the officials. It's the police, it's the Home Affairs, and border management control.
Mr. Isub, is part of the solution reserving certain jobs for South Africans, for the locals? Is that part of a bigger plan to resolve this issue?
That was tested in the Constitutional Court not so long ago. There was an application that security officers can only be South African citizens, and that was shot down by the Constitutional Court, where it said that in order to belong to SIRA, you didn't have to be a South African. The argument was that, it's such a critical part of our security to hand over private armies, basically, to do your security. It could be a threat on the state. But the Constitutional Court said no, it cannot apply because of the principle of equality, which is vouchsafed in the Bill of Rights, which is the cornerstone of democracy. So job reservation is not going to work.
Right.
What is really going to work is job creation, and understanding that South Africa is extremely resource rich. Yes, it has problems, but we must be able to find solutions. The ground roots of the problems must be addressed.
Right.
And society must find solutions.
All right. Advice, let's button up in terms of your final thoughts.
Yeah, no, thanks. I also beg to differ with our aspect here. When we say job reservation cannot be equated to creating and alleviating some of these problems. These are one of the things that are critical to say, we can't have illegal immigrants, owning our local economy. The restaurant, like the colleague in the far right, what he was saying in terms of, to make sure that our young people, get these opportunities. Yeah. But if now for the job entry and intern, you need to compete with an international or to be a waiter or to be a restaurant, we can't say, no, that should be reserved for the South Africans, and then this problem will continue. So as a result, where possible, there must be reservations of the jobs that these ones are strictly for South Africans because they don't fall within the scarce skills. Hence, it is also necessary to review that scarce skills because some of the jobs that are there to oppress young people so that they don't get the opportunities that they deserve in their own countries.
Right. All right, thank you very much indeed, Advice. To all my guests, thank you so much indeed to the audience as well for your contributions. We're not going to solve this issue in an hour or so, but I guess it's a step in the right direction in understanding the possible solutions, having clear eyes for avenues of opportunity in order to put pay to some of the immigration issues. I guess the big thing, though, the big takeaway is let's make conversation the cure. Let's make it part of the cure to get us to that better place. All right, that's a wrap of It's Topical. Until next week, my brothers and sisters.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to GNU according to CD, that's Government of National Unity. So, guys, I put a montage of the panelists, everything that they have said, emanating from questions that was coming or comments that were coming from the floor, meaning the public that was there. And the public is divided into two. Those are South Africans as well as foreign nationals. From what I'm hearing, it sounds to me like on the foreign national side of things, even though it's also the same with South Africans, that the foreigners have actually formed their own political parties, which, by the way, the question is, how are they recognized? Were they registered? For them to be so boldly to say, I come from this organization, or I'm the chairperson of this organization, or whatever the case might be. Because I know with South Africans, you do have to register an organization. You can't just say, oh, I come from the GNUCD, put South Africans First organization, and I am not registered with CIPRO, either as an NGO, NPO, or as a company. You understand what I'm trying to say? So it's quite interesting to hear that coming from their side. However, my biggest take on the panelists is the EFF. The EFF, for me, I feel like they are flip-floppers. Not so long ago, their president told South Africans blank on the face that he will never put South Africans first, ever. And I'm not quite sure. He keeps pointing fingers and saying things like, oh, publicity stunts this and publicity stunts that. And yet he is the one who's coming to make South Africans the fools. Boo-boo the fools. The moo-moos, as his friends will call us. I'm talking about the EFF here. And in as much as Sihle Nlonzi is making sense, unfortunately for me, what he's trying to say, it's too late. I don't take it serious. I cannot trust it, because he will say this and his leader will take to the stage and then mock and be rude and just downright hatred towards South African citizens when it comes to foreign nationals. So I don't trust a thing that he said, unfortunately, though I agree with some of the things that he has said. I just wish they were said by somebody else. And another thing that I also took note of is that Home Affairs made a big blunder by not being present as a panelist, because there were South African citizens there who needed answers. There were South African citizens in there who needed to submit things to the Minister of Home Affairs, or at least a representative. I would have loved to have been the minister himself, if not the DG himself. So there's, of course, there's a lot of missing elements in that discussion, which to me ended up being like a sounding gong into the air without having the correct people as members of the panelists and able to even break down the immigration reform or the overhaul of our immigration law to say, guys, this is what we are working on, so that the South Africans that are sitting in the audience and those that are watching feel a sense of, oh, at least something is being done about it, rather than us feeling like, we've been here before and we've been told this before and nothing ever happened as a result. And I did say on my this very channel that all of these restaurant ratings after Mihlali exposed Babel, and then suddenly we're seeing a spread of raids and arrests. I said, no. This feels like a publicity stunt to me, because I'll tell you why. Remember the discovery of the 95 Libyans that were operating a paramilitary camp in Pumalanga? Where are they? They were taken back home, and guess what happened? We saw them. There were cameras at, I think it was not Lansera Airport. I think it was Waterkloof. No, it was not Waterkloof. It was in Pumalanga, though. We saw in full view the plane take off. I still even remember the name of the plane. The plane. It was Sim Air. Sim Air is the one that transported those 95 Libyans back to their home country after they were declared illegal and also persona non gratas. And then now we are having these raids and arrests of illegal foreigners, and nothing is being said. We're not seeing any updates. We don't know if these people are back home or they are still in the country or they've gone back to their jobs. I mean, we did see also the Department of Labor's chief, whatever, saying that, oh no, we need to she feels sorry for them, and then this is not is right, and then we need to get them proper documentation so that they can go back and be protected, instead of her just shutting the up and let Home Affairs do its job. And then what she needs to do is implement the law against these restaurant owners that are exploiting, not only exploiting, but breaking the immigration laws of this country by employing illegal foreigners. But no, she's empathetic to people that are breaking the law. And yes, indeed, she was creating her own laws in her country. I mean, in her own head, that we are going to properly document them. Like, seriously, that lady needs to go. In fact, she should be called to go, because we cannot have people like her running such a critical department of our government when so many South Africans are unemployed. So many, 33.5% to be exact. So there's no way that we can have her in this position that she's in. You see, those are the things that we want to see. Where are these people that were arrested? We want to see them. We want to see planes. We want to see buses. We want to see taxis filled with them taken back home. That's what we want to see. So that is why, to me, it felt like it was a publicity stunt, and I still feel like it was a publicity stunt. And there's many other stuff that I totally agreed with the action essay guy there, and I also don't like the fact that this panel was politically infused, instead of having like what do you call this, local based organizations that represent youth, organizations that represent women, organizations that represent our local economy, organizations that deal with the day-to-day life of South Africans, rather than political parties. Seriously, political parties, all they will ever do is to sound nice, so that when it's time for elections, we vote them back into power. That's the mistake we are not going to make, especially with the EFF. I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. All of these things are happening, and these guys are so brazenly happy because of the utterances of Julius Malema. Sometimes they even throw these things on our faces and say, "Oh, South Africans regret. Why did you not vote Malema into government?" Like, seriously, who regrets that? Who regrets that? I'm happy that he's in the outskirts. That's what I'm happy about. There's no way that I'll ever put my vote for EFF, especially for Julius Malema to be the president of the Republic of South Africa. That's not going to happen. Anyways, I don't want to be too political because this was politically infused, unfortunately, with two political parties. Other than that, let me put together now a compilation of the public, what the public was saying, so that these responses you are hearing from the panelists make sense to you. This is the last one, I promise.